Mythical Island has been out for, oh, not very long right now, so I'm going to give you some early takes on what I think is really strong in Mythical Island, what is not so strong, what is maybe kind of overhyped, and hopefully by the end of this, some of it I'm right about, some of it I'm wrong about. I would love to hear from you in the comments, and I would love to see maybe what things I've completely overlooked as the meta continues to evolve. Let's get into it. I think it's reasonable to start this list with one of the best additions, and that is Celebi EX. Now, Celebi EX I actually think there's a bigger conversation to be had around it, but let's talk about Celebi. 2 energy, and with 2 energy, you are able to start flipping some coins and doing some damage. While I think Celebi is pretty good and makes an exciting grass deck, I really do think there's another card that is the star of Mythical Island, and it's not something any of us expected maybe, and that is Superior. While Celebi EX is good, especially the second Celebi EX in your deck, where when you're able to just put 1 energy on it and start flipping heads, you could really do some serious damage, Superior is the reason for that. It is a stage 2 grass Pokemon with the ability Jungle Totem. Jungle Totem makes every single piece of grass energy on your grass Pokemon 2 grass energy. This counts for trying to retreat, this counts for using attacks, this counts for another thing that I can't think of right now, but in general, I think Superior really is the superior card in Mythical Island for grass type decks. You could see it be used in a lot of different situations, especially with things like Executor, but of course it powers Celebi in a crazy way. In a world where Gardevoir exists to give 1 energy to that Pokemon in the active spot, Superior says, hold my Bud Light screen, because here we go. Another grass card I want to talk about that I think is awesome is the new Executor. So this takes 4 energy to do 80 damage plus 20 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. There are a lot of great situations where this card can do some insane damage, and with Superior, this card requires 2 energy. So you pair that with the new Execute, you get this energy right away. You can evolve if you have Superior on the bench. For 2 energy, you're doing a ton of damage on a non-EX Pokemon. I think it's a really, really solid card, and I'm excited to see how it works its way into some grass decks. Moving right along from grass decks to water type decks, I am so excited to say that I think Gyarados EX is really, really good. 100 HP, 140 damage, meaning with a Giovanni, this KOs Mewtwo EX in 1 hit, and it takes out a lot of the roster already. Even though you are discarding a random energy from the energy attached to all Pokemon, this doesn't feel like the relevant part of the card really. It's just that it does insane damage, has a ton of HP, and with a new friend, this card actually gets powered up pretty easily. That new friend being Vaporeon. Vaporeon, just like Superior, I think is the unsung hero maybe of this new set. Vaporeon is crazy good for water decks. Its ability Washout allows you to move water energy to water Pokemon in your active spot. Because of this, you can use cards that have low retreat or no retreat cost, like Starmie EX, do a ton of damage early, retreat them for free back to your bench, and then use all of the other energy you've been gathering to power up something like Gyarados or Blastoise and just do some crazy damage to your opponents. I gotta say, Vaporeon and Superior are like 2 sides of the same coin. Neither of them are the EX cards, and both of them make the EX cards shine in amazing ways. Now let's talk about a little bit of a weird one. This card I think is really exciting, and it's Druddigon. Now the reason it's exciting is not because of its attack. It requires 3 energy, 1 being colorless, 1 being fire, 1 being water, to do 90 damage. That's probably not gonna happen a lot. It's kind of hard to set up a deck like that, even though I'm sure someone will build a really cool deck utilizing that. Really what this is an amazing frontline tank so that you can set up anything you want behind it. Part of the reason is this card has no weakness. It has 100 HP, so it's surviving a lot of different attacks. It has a 2 retreat cost, which I'll talk more about here in a sec, and its ability Rough Skin. If it takes damage, it does 20 damage back to the attacking Pokemon. It has so much going on for it that it really does feel like it replaces a lot of things like Snorlaxes, just big walls that you've had in your decks for a long time. Druddigon could be that replacement, which I think is really cool. Our next card is Pidgeot EX. This is a pretty exciting card. So it has a ton of HP, 170. It's weak to lightning, but I feel like lightning is in a little bit of a downswing right now, so you don't actually see that much of it, at least in a lot of the games I've played. It's mainly grass and psychic and things like that. Scattering Cyclone. 80 damage plus 20 damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Already doing some solid damage, and most decks that you're running into have at least 2 Pokemon on the bench, right? So if you're looking at something like Celebi, you probably see another Celebi, maybe another card like Delmise or something like that, and then a set up Serperior. If you're looking at Mewtwo, you probably see Mewtwo, Gardevoir, the other Mewtwo on the bench. So a lot of the time this is doing 120 damage. It could do up to 140, which is really cool. You also can pair this with Pokeflute. Let's talk about Pokeflute for a sec here. I said Pokeflute, but it's Pokemon Flute. I apologize to everybody. Pokemon Flute puts a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile back to their bench. So if you've already knocked out a Pokemon, you can play the Pokemon Flute. That would bring a card back to that bench, and you will do more damage with Pidgeot. There are other situations this can be good with. Of course, if you are sniping your opponent's bench, you could set up some really fun stuff. I think this card is very specific and not one of the best cards in the set, but I do think it offers some really cool deck building options. Let me talk about a trainer card I think is amazing. That is the Supporter Leaf. During your turn, your retreat cost of your active Pokemon is 2 less. This is massive, and I still think X-Speed is a very good card in certain decks, right? But just as we looked at earlier with something like Druddigon, or even something like our Gyarados EX deck, that deck has a few Pokemon that have 2 retreat costs, and sometimes it's really difficult to get these Pokemon moved out so that you can get something in while also not wasting a ton of energy. Well, Leaf solves that in a huge way. I think this is probably the best trainer card added to this set. Let me think about it, but I think Leaf is incredibly good, and you could slot it into a ton of different decks that formerly had too high of a retreat cost to really let some Pokemon sort of play. Now that is no longer an issue. If you were watching my stream the other day, you know how much I like this next card. This is Mythical Slab. Mythical Slab is solving the problem that Psychic decks were just not consistent enough. You know, those Mewtwo Gardevoir decks couldn't seem to win at all. Let's give them another card to make sure that they can pull Psychic Pokemon into their hand. That is Mythical Slab. The way this works is you look at the top card of your deck. If it's a Psychic Pokemon, you put it in your hand. If it's not, you put it at the bottom of your deck. So there are a couple ways to play this, right? You can play this when your deck is stacked full of Pokemon, giving you the highest likelihood to draw another Psychic Pokemon, or you could play this as you are searching for something like Gardevoir. So you've already used your Pokeballs, you've already used your Professor's Research maybe, so you know that your deck is kind of thin and you're looking to pull Guard. If you play Mythical Slab and Guard or Kirlia, the card you're looking for most likely, is not the top card, whatever it was that you probably didn't need because you really need Gardevoir at this point gets thrown to the bottom. I think this is a cool card, and I'm also shocked that they added something to help Mewtwo because that card wasn't struggling at all, but here we are. For the next best cards in the set, I want to talk about 2 at the same time, and that is Mew EX and Budding Expeditioner. So Mew EX has a lot of cool stuff going on. It's a basic EX. You attack for 1 energy. You have genome hacking for 3 colorless, allowing you to copy your opponent's move. We had some really fun moments copying our opponent's move on stream yesterday. I think this can slot into a ton of decks. Interestingly enough, I didn't love it in the Mewtwo deck. I actually kind of liked having something like Baby Mewtwo maybe instead, or just pulling Mew altogether. It felt like it was making my deck a little less consistent, but I'm sure people are going to find some really exciting ways to use this in a Psychic deck. The really interesting thing, of course, with this is Budding Expeditioner. Budding Expeditioner gives you the ability to basically Koga your Mew. So you can play this, Mew goes back to your hand, all the damage taken is gone, all is forgiven, and somehow we have a Koga for an EX Pokemon, Mew EX. I'm most excited to see what Mew does in other decks, as opposed to what it does in Mewtwo Gardevoir, honestly. But again, it will probably be very good there also. There are a lot of honorable mentions like Dedenne and Marshadow and a lot of really cool things. I think the new Salandit is very fun. But I want to talk about some cards that I think are pretty underwhelming in this set. As I mentioned earlier, this is all still very new, so maybe I'm just reading some of this very wrong, and these cards will actually have a lot of value and people could make cool decks with them. But I gotta get into some cards that I just don't think are cutting the mustard. Something that, you know, isn't that hard to do. First is going to be Aerodactyl EX. I was a little hesitant to say this card was looking good even when I saw it early. It's weird, right? It does okay damage, 80 damage for 2 energy. That's not bad. It's a stage 1. That's not terrible. You also can set up some decks where you are guaranteeing that you are not drawing this card early, which has its advantages, right? You're guaranteeing other basics that you draw because this card evolves from Old Amber. Old Amber is not a basic Pokemon, so Pokeball doesn't grab it, and it isn't guaranteed to be one of the cards in your hand at the start of a game. There are some cool strategies around this. I do think its ability, Primeval Law, is mostly not good. It's not that it's not useful sometimes to stop the opponent's Pokemon in the active spot from evolving. It's just that that's not where a lot of the evolution is happening, my guy. A lot of it's happening on the bench. A lot of times you're not putting out Squirtle, Wartortle, Blastoise right in front of your opponents. Same thing with Serperior or Gardevoir or Charizard. All of these cards are evolving on the bench while something else is setting them up. And I think because of that, Aerodactyl is just pretty underwhelming, honestly. I don't know. I am excited to see people prove me wrong with this. I just don't see a lot of situations where this card is going to provide a ton of value. So yeah, a little bummed about Aerodactyl EX, but hopefully we see some really cool decks with it. Next is going to be Volcarona. Volcarona seems like a really cool card. You do 80 damage to any Pokemon on your opponent's side, right? So this obviously is set up to make some really cool snipes to your opponent's bench. The tough thing about this is Larvesta. Larvesta is awful. It is a basic Pokemon that has a 2 retreat cost, requires 2 energy to attack, and every single deck I was putting Larvesta and Volcarona in, I was just running into Larvesta as my basic Pokemon so many times, even though I'm trying to power this thing up with Moltres. I think there are going to be some cool, maybe one-off plays you could make with this, and you could slot this into different fire decks that you're already setting up to power, you know, Charizard or Arcanine, and then you have Volcarona as a way to kind of snipe something on the bench with a super exciting play. I think that could happen, but I just don't think this deck, or this card, excuse me, is really going to be a superstar card. Again, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not seeing a lot of value from it. Also, you have to discard 2 of your energy. I don't know. It just feels like a little bit of a mess. The next card I want to talk about is a supporter, and that is the Trainer Blue. Now, I'm fully ready to eat my words here and go, wow, Blue was actually so good. I just didn't see a lot of situations where I would want to run this card over all of the other good trainers and supports in the game. And I do think at some point you have to recognize, look, you have 20 cards in your deck. How many cards are you going to sacrifice? How many other cards are you going to take out so that you can put in a card that lowers your damage by 10? Now, there could be some really interesting breakpoints and matchups where Blue actually turns the tide of a losing situation. So I'm hesitant to say it's bad. I just can't think of a lot of situations where I feel like I would want Blue in my deck as opposed to, again, so many other options. More basic Pokemon, better trainers, etc. There are some other cards we haven't talked about here, like Stonejourner, Dreadnought, Cramorant. I want to play around with more of these cards. I also have not talked much about the Lightning cards. I think Dedenne could be cool, and maybe this new Raichu could be very, very fun, but I need to spend more time with it. Let me know what you think is the best and worst in the comments. Let me know what I got totally right or totally wrong. As always, I love hearing the discussion. Just be cool to each other, especially be cool to each other in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I love you guys, and I'll be on very soon, or probably right now, playing more Pocket. Bye. We did it.